Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. Music has always been a megaphone for rebellion, a place where artists call out injustice, challenge systems, and say what politicians won't. So when some of those same voices start sounding less like rebels and more like guest commentators on Russian state TV, you gotta ask, what happened? Let's start with Azealia Banks. In a now deleted post, she commented on a before and after photo of Ukrainian soldier Alexander Kiriyenko, shown visibly malnourished after being released from Russian captivity. Her response? Well, something needs to stop his fat ass from eating. That's not edgy, that's just plain cruelty. And this wasn't her first Kremlin-adjacent moment. Back in 2022, shortly after the invasion, she said she loves Putin. And in June of this year, she posted a long screed blaming the EU for, quote, drumming up more bullshit, calling Zelensky a cokehead and a drama school reject, and suggesting Ukraine just needs to elect a new leader, as if elections are a top priority in a war zone. She also performs under the name Azilka, using Russian spelling when performing in post-Soviet countries. Then came the mask-off moment. Quote, I'm pro-Russia on this topic. Quote, Russia wouldn't be in Ukraine if not for US meddling, and quote, they earned that land, they're mighty people. Now that's not critique, that's just Russian propaganda, word for word. Now, let's be real, a not insignificant portion of Americans are tired. War fatigue is real, people want answers. Where's the money going? What is the end game? Does supporting Ukraine mean ignoring problems at home? Now those are legitimate questions. That's what domestic debate look like. But praising Putin, mocking POWs, repeating the narrative that Russia is the real victim here, that's not challenging power, that's being used by it. And Azalia's not the only one flirting with that line. Offset announced a concert in Moscow this year, despite his record label reportedly boycotting the Russian market. The Baby signed under the same label, as reportedly performed in Russia as well, playing well in the regime that controls the narrative. Jason Derulo visited Belarus, Russia's authoritarian wingman, and told the prime minister he was impressed and eager to perform there. That clip ran on BeltA, which might as well have a Kremlin watermark in the corner.
So how's your impressions about Minsk?
It's unbelievable. I want to make this my new home. I love the people here. You know, everyone is
Очень нравятся люди
really
здесь.
respectful.
Все очень уважительно относятся.
I even went out into the town
Когда он гулял по городу
yesterday.
вчера.
And even when people like come and ask for pictures, everybody's really polite.
And Kanye West, who once called himself Young Putin, also visited Moscow in 2024 for a party with Russian designer Gosha Rubchinsky. Russian state media treated it like a diplomatic visit and plastered the rapper all over TV. Turns out when the Kremlin propagandists say they are being praised by the West, they really just mean Kanye. I guess we give him that one on technicality. Now, maybe none of these artists meant to make a statement, but in the middle of a war, they all send signals, especially when they're amplified by regimes looking for credibility and distraction. Because Russia doesn't even need to convince people it's right, it just needs to convince them that the truth is too complicated to care about. So no, this isn't about canceling celebrities, it's about understanding how cultural clout becomes political cover, how platforms get weaponized. Look, do your thing. Criticize EU? Sure. Bash NATO? Go ahead. Question US policy? Absolutely. But when your take starts echoing the logic of war criminals, maybe step back and ask who really stands to gain here. Air your grievances, be loud, be skeptical, but be careful who you align with, because sometimes the system you think you're fighting is just using you as a mic. Maria Zakharova, the eternal spokesperson for the Ministry of Alternative Reality, also known as the Russian Foreign Ministry, is back with another statement that defies not just logic, but gravity, coherence, and general principle of sentient thought. This time, she's asking the world to please not make the bombing of nuclear facilities a routine thing. Yeah, I had to do a double take on that one too.
Объектов не должны становиться буквально таким обычным делом, такой рутиной в международной практике. Связанные с этим катастрофические риски нельзя ни игнорировать, ни тем более оправдывать. Совет Безопасности Организации Объединенных Наций давно и однозначно квалифицировал такие нападения как недопустимые. Хотя теперь об этом некоторые не любят вспоминать, а то и вовсе игнорируют, поставив свою конъюнктурную политику превыше всего.
Irony at the Russian Foreign Ministry is a job requirement, apparently. Here we have the very country that turned Europe's largest nuclear power plant into a shooting gallery, now lecturing the rest of us about the dangers of bombing nuclear power plants. What's next? A Russian guidebook called How to Be a Pacifist? Or maybe a new UN resolution from Moscow? Thou shalt not fly drones towards Kremlin, but thou mayst flatten apartment blocks in Kyiv. Apparently, diplomacy in Russia now means shouting hypocritical nonsense with a straight face and praying everyone has a memory of a goldfish. Zakharova's latest outburst borders performance art. She says bombing nuclear plants shouldn't become routine, like shelling Zaporizhia isn't just another Tuesday for Russia. While the rest of the world is desperately trying to contain a war, prevent nuclear disaster, and pull humanity back from the brink, what is Russia doing? Playing innocent, yelling, "Wasn't me." But these Kremlin antics don't make Russia look strong or clever. They make it look like what it's rapidly becoming, a walking, talking, meme-fueled punchline on a global stage. In Vladimir Solovyov's studio, where patriotism hangs in the air like bad cologne and common sense is an endangered species, a real gladiator battle has just went down. The arena, the Russian economy. Contenders, Solovyov, Elvira Nabiullina, and the searing pain of the average Russian paycheck. Nabiullina, head of the central bank of the Russian Federation, dared to say what usually gets buried deeper than a Wagner recruit's conscience. Russians are going to have to tighten their belts, and no, not as a fashion statement.
Я задаю простейший вопрос. А вот эти люди в Центробанке, они же независимы, да? А как может быть тогда Россия суверенной, если ее денежная политика и кредитная политика принадлежат кому-то еще? Тогда получается, мы не суверенны. Если верховный главнокомандующий, президент Российской Федерации Владимир Владимирович Путин ставит задачу до 2030 года, что темпы роста валового внутреннего продукта должны быть выше среднемировых, а Центробанк на полном серьезе говорит, а меня не волнует. И выкатывает вот такой прогноз, это что? Ну тогда уберите слово «Центральный банк России». Ну слово «России» тогда уберите. Вы же суверенны. А России тогда, получается, надо как-то самой решать задачу. Мы же, вы меня, конечно, извините, я не голосовал за Набиуллину. Я голосовал за президента Российской Федерации. Он ставит задачи. И я не понимаю, почему кто-то вот позволяет себе взять и на полном серьезе выкатить прогноз, который полностью противоречит прямым директивам, исходящим от руководства страны, за которого голосовал народ.
According to the head of the central bank, there are no miracle fixes on the way. Inflation isn't taking a nap, and GDP is still stuck in traffic, despite all the magic spells being cast from the presidential bunker. That's when Solovyov lit up like a Soviet appliance plugged into a wrong socket. And his big argument? He voted for Putin. Because in Solovyov's fantasy land, Putin is the greatest president in the galaxy and is always doing his best for the people. But here's the twist. Yeah, Solovyov voted for Putin, not for Nabiullina, but I'll give you 3 guesses as to who appointed her. Yep, that's right, Putin, the very man Solovyov worshipped like a shrine. So in trying to dunk on her, Solovyov accidentally dunked on Putin's judgment. Classic. Russian propaganda exists in a parallel universe where charts only go up, enemies are always losing, and utopia is just one speech away. But every now and then, a shard of truth slips through, and when it does, the patriotic peacocks on TV start squawking, because nothing terrifies a propaganda machine more than reality knocking on the studio door. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.